Good morning, Dale.
Good morning, all. Hey, Mark. Hey, David.
Good morning.
Good morning, David.
Good morning, Mark.
So, Mark, I think you've loaded me down with material for today, so that'll be good.
I hope that's all right.
Plus whatever else wherever else it goes, and it is all right. It absolutely is. I'd rather have stuff to talk about than sing. You guys got a busy weekend planned? I'm. You remember a few months ago, I was extra in a TV show for the Chosen show. That was talked about on Low Code Cafe, but that episode is finally airing this week.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, I'm going to be an extra in a crowd of thousands. So,
How do you get to be doing that?
Well, if you follow along with the show, there's opportunities to contribute, and for those that are contributing at a certain level, you get invited to things like being an extra.
Oh.
And it was entirely convenient because they filmed out at Midlothian, Texas, which is maybe 45 minutes away.
Uh-huh.
There were people there from all over the country that got double COVID tested and froze. It was 32 degrees that day, and we were all dressed in first century garb. So it was there were people that wanted it a lot more than I did, is what I guess I'm saying. They came from across the country to freeze out in the fields of Texas.
Wicked.
Hey, Jim. Okay, I am just going to go ahead and start. So let me do the run through. Hello, welcome to Low Code Campfire, number 9. Summer fun and profanity is the topic, or anything else we want to get into. The Low Code Campfire is intended to be a community gathering. Anybody can participate, but we kind of lean towards the technical or the challenges that you're experiencing. But hopefully you're always welcome to bring something to show or ideas and suggestions. We have all these episodes, including this one, are recorded. We put them out on YouTube, and you can subscribe to those. There's our link to subscribe. This is, since we're doing it as a meeting format, the main way to engage is to jump in, come off mute, undo your camera if you want to, and let's talk. If you got noise going on behind you, let's do mute. And this is the big one, and you can either shoot me an email or submit your questions and topics here. But when we do something in advance, if there's a question in advance, I prepare a little bit and see what's going on, see if I can bring something to the table. But otherwise, at least we have them and we get them onto the agenda. So with that, everybody that's here has been here before, so we'll just say hi and move right on into Campfire.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey.
Good morning.
So I mentioned this last week, and I don't know if you're able and interested, but we would sure love for you to participate in the Capterra Reviews, and there's the place to do that. If you haven't, it helps us out a great deal, and I think you get $20 out of it as well. But we're trying to move our profile up a little bit, and this helps people find us and understand what it is that we do. So we have a member of Campfire that is read only. Anthony has submitted several questions, and unfortunately Campfire happens in the middle of the night for him, so he hasn't been able to join us, but he follows along with the recordings, and So he's submitted a question, I think, last week, and we're picking up another one this week. And so he's asking about profanity filters. And he noted that there is some profanity filtering, or was, that goes along with DNN. And I did a little bit of research on it. I'm not sure how active that is in the current version 9 of .NET Nuke, but just wondering if you guys do any public facing websites, and if you solve any issues, if profanity is an issue that you have to deal with, and what you're doing about it. And I found an answer, but not necessarily the answer. So anybody having to deal with profanity?
Not yet.
Is yours going to be a public facing, or is it a public facing site? Or
Yes, I have several public facing sites, so this is interesting.
yep. And I guess, it probably depends a lot on the site. I know, for example, I've mentioned before, I work with David, and have some public facing sites for that client, but it's a pretty controlled user group, and not really prone to people trying to cause trouble. And yet, if you were trying to do I'll just make it, whether it was maybe a political site or a bulletin board, or invite all comers, you might get a different level of participation that maybe you don't want. Jim, yours is public. You probably do your, or it.
Well, our content comes from the inside, but on our request list is letting people share comments on their trains and their layouts. And it is a concern of mine, because if I follow our Facebook platform, other people have serious problems with profanity, and also political views that get ranting and raving, and like, no, we have a hobby here, we want to try to bring it and keep everybody talk on the topic. So
Yeah.
right now, our public postings, we don't allow things to go without being reviewed by the moderator.
Well, exactly. That's certainly one of them. And so, that's interesting. Ideas, there's profanity, there's a little bit of, that's a little bit more of an absolute definition. And then there's ideas, what do you want to allow? And that's a little bit harder to define.
And we just don't like the people that sit there and start, oh, you want to talk about a model train, and then the conversation goes off, left and right, and, with no trains involved.
Well, exactly. And regardless of your position, you're going to lose about half the people,
Right,
or more, when you start doing that. And you're right. It's not, you're there for trains. So I spent just a few minutes on this, and I'll just report what I found. A couple of things. One, in the .NET Nuke world, let me see if I can answer. I found a discussion about what used to be within .NET Nuke, the ability to manage lists. So you could have lists of words and do replacements on words, and this was within their messaging system that they built into the product. What I'm finding was even a very recent discussion about that their list management capability got removed in version 9. So while the table is there, I don't think the ability to modify it is part of the core product. And I'm not sure that I really don't know how advanced it was. But then, so then I took a different track and said, well, somebody has to have solved this problem. And really, this is a mindset change that I need to make. There are so many things that are available by API. Some are free, some are inexpensive. Is it worth reinventing the wheel? And I found there's really lots, right? There's really lots of people that are dealing with this thing. But the one that I jumped onto to at least do a quick demo today was this Rapid API profanity filter because it's free. And then Web Purify is interesting because when you start paying money, you start getting some control. This profanity filter API that I'm going to show, there's no control. It just, you know, it's monitoring for the words that it wants to monitor for. I found some that might be a problem for, it might be eliminating some words that you don't want to eliminate. And you know, you might want to whitelist, and I don't think there's any built-in ability to whitelist. So you don't get a lot of control, but you get a lot for nothing. So let's look at that one first. What I did was build a quick workflow that would be very easy to consume. So on the input side, it has what text you want to check. So you could use this, for example, in the actions to a button. You could pass your forum entry text to the workflow, and then on the outside of it, you're going to get the full result of what came back from the API call, the censored content or clean text. So you could just replace what they did with clean text, whether or not it detected anything and what bad words it detected. So this is the result. So very easy to call, and you get some interesting results. And it's not, the action is very simple. We're doing a request to this bad word filter by a server request. It's we're posting the text to check, and we're replacing whatever it finds bad. The censor character is an asterisk. You have to pass it a couple of headers, and that's it. And then it returns filter results. So then I am parsing filter results into the JSON into its results. And so this gives us the ability to say that we have we're putting the full result into filter results, so you can see everything that it's returning, but then the various components of results are being broken out into their individual things. So when we run this, we have a text here, you are a valued associate. When we run it with that default text, we get back the full thing is shown here, but breaking it out, you get back the same thing that you sent to it. There's nothing bad in there, and there's nothing in the bad word list. If we do the same thing and modify it slightly, we get a clean text back with stars, and that there is a bad word in there, at least one bad, and what the bad word was. So all that, you know, writing a API call, writing a workflow to use that whole thing took 15 minutes, and you solve the problem, and somebody else is doing all the work. So it was really pretty impressed with it.
Interesting to me to be able to do that with a workflow call, because then I could, one of the problems we've run in, sort of similar to what you just, your example there, is we get text from our vendors that, you know, to put to our website, they could have a typo in it, and you could run it through that filter via the workflow before you load it to our website.
Yeah. And it seems to do a pretty good job. You know, for example, I tried a couple of variations where, like, obviously this one very close, but it's not just looking for the words, for the string of characters. It's pulling out the words. I also ran a series of what would be considered bad words together. So if somebody isn't following rules of punctuation or whatever, they're still getting rejected. So there's some smarts built into it. One of the things that I was interested in is, you know, especially in the UK, bloody is considered a bad word, and this one is. So if you were talking about I have bloody hands, and that one might be a valid thing to say, it's being listed as a bad word. So you'd have to do some, you know, perhaps your own whitelisting and say, yeah, I'm not concerned about that one. There's only one bad word, and I don't consider it a bad word. So you'd have to do some extra work, right? So, but it's free, and so that's an option. This. I'm going to copy this link. I think this is the one that showed there was, yeah, there's a bunch. So here's, best profanity filter APIs, and then there's some SDKs and whatever. I just took the first one off the list. I was pretty lazy, but it allowed me to just pass some, get a couple of credentials and use it without any big deal. So that was interesting. So there's options there. And then this other one, this $5 a month one, just kind of starts to talk about the kinds of things that might be interesting. So their Web Purify for $5 a month, you're getting, you can check, you can get a count, you can have add to your block list or add to your allow list. So you got to start getting some control about what it's doing and how you're gonna letting you tailor it down a little bit. And then, just thinking about it, another one that I've played with a little bit, and if you haven't, there's some fun stuff, but Amazon Web Services, and I don't know, they may even have a profanity filter, but what I got was looking at was there's some artificial intelligence kinds of things that does text analysis and will tell you the sentiment of a post. So ranging anywhere from upset to neutral to upbeat. And so for a very inexpensive fee, you could call an API like that to say, is this somebody who's ranting? And maybe start taking the ones that are more, the sentiment is something that you're concerned with. You might moderate those and not moderate the happy ones. There's a bunch of tools there that will identify, for example, the keywords or what the product, what the request is about. We were looking into this. Eventually, we may incorporate something like that into our support center application, because if you're getting a support request in from somebody who's unhappy, I mean, it's one thing when somebody reports, hey, I have a problem with action form. But if somebody's ranting about how horrible you are, maybe you want to look at that one first, and whether it's moderated or jump in on it. So anyway, just pointing out there's a possibility of bringing AWS into the mix as well. Morning, Albert. I see you joined us along the way. Hello, hello.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Hey, Albert. Hey, Dale, that's very interesting and helpful. I'm sure that I'm going to be looking back on this when I start implementing that. That's nice.
Well, good. Well, so I'm glad Anthony asked the question. I hope that he pulls something out of this, and whether live or by email, we're happy to dig in and help with some of these. So the next one was by a guy named Mark. And I saw that you also posted this to the community forum and had a lot of discussion on that yesterday. So I don't know, maybe you've got all the answers that you need, but we were talking about how do you pass things and initialize things, and so what did you come away with from that discussion, and maybe what's your problem, and where do you think you're going with it now?
I have a fun application, I think, for me. Building something that allows somebody to set up a meeting with people who they don't know when they're going to be available. So it's like a doodle poll, if you've done one of those. And so I need to be able to load a page that creates a record in the database that initiates a meeting. But then other forms on the same page need to be able to know which record has just been opened, so that they can like set up times that are optional times and people who are going to be associated with the meeting. So multiple forms, same page, they all need to be on or know about which one is the active record. So I can pass an ID around. That is the question. How do I pass the ID of a brand new created record from one form to another? And preferably, I'd like to do it silently.
Right.
I prefer not to have that up in the URL bar. I think it's probably fine. But I think it just kind of, I don't know, it pollutes the URL a little bit. I guess
It does what to the URL? Pollute.
It makes it look
Yep.
bad. So, but other than that, I think it's going to be fun. I know there's going to be times I'm going to want that to be in the URL because I'm going to be telling them to pass it to people, and I want them to open up the right record when they do that. But so the question is, how do I have a value or an ID and be able to communicate it to multiple modules on the same page silently? Things that were thrown around were session variable, cookie, creating a record in the database to manage which piece of information is current for the person who's logged in at the time. I don't think that I have an answer yet that I'm thrilled about. So I think I'd be happy to have suggestions.
And I haven't looked at that ticket, that community forum question and all the answers in detail. I scanned it. So is anybody who's on the call, anybody participate in that one yesterday?
I brought up the session variable idea because I use that in our app, and then my downside to that is we do it in our store and people walk away from a terminal and it comes back, and the session variable will have timed out, but they'll look at the data and then say, oh, here's something, let's go click on this item. Now that whatever variable was filtered isn't there anymore, so they get redirected back.
Yep.
Right, Jim, I thought that was you that gave that suggestion. I really like it. I just can't predict how long people are going to be sitting on my page and inactive.
Yeah, and it's the same problem I have. I mean, we'll pull up a customer. We use it for a customer selection, and then they may be there in the store, and our sales associate will go walk them into the store to find something, and they'll come back and, oh, let's look at this other thing, and that we end up having to filter the links to say, if this variable's gone null, then start the process again.
Right.
I thought Ben's suggestion of writing it to a quick table was pretty neat. I don't know if it was you that commented back about the IP address being problematic, because that was the first thing I saw. That I know in my house here, what public websites get the same IP address whether I'm searching or my wife does, because I get some really weird stuff coming up as product suggestions.
Right. Yeah.
Other IDs, maybe a browser ID or something like that, that would you can capture from the request and put that into the key value.
Right.
So I have a few thoughts. I could probably go on for a while, but we'll start on query string. Part of the fun there, like say, A, there's the pollution of the query string, and then B, there's, depending on what you're doing, there could be security. Do you want somebody to be able to access this thing, whatever you're doing, without, directly? And you may need to. I often use GUIDs or other random kinds of content if I'm going to do something on a query string, because I don't want them to be able to guess, well, if I'm, product ID 1, I don't want to let them go to product ID 2 and 3 and 4 without, if somebody's trying to mess with the URL.
Exactly.
So, or if you're doing like a forum, a communication kind of thing, and they're on channel 1 and they move to channel 2, which is somebody else completely different, whatever. So a random query string kind of parameter helps, would eliminate that part of it, unless somebody is invited into the discussion. But of course, that's very ephemeral. I'm going to back up a second. You've got two parts to your problem. One is that you're trying to do everything on one page, and then the other is what mechanism are you using? If a form that's on the page in the init is doing the work, the question always becomes, well, is this information going to be available to the other items, to the other modules on the page at the right time? And for me, rather than fighting that battle, what I do is try to engineer it so that you don't have that issue. So, for example, if the whatever your target page is that has all these modules on it, however you get there, if the action that lands you there is a button, a grid, or something that you have some control over, you could do the action to create the ID before you get there, right?
Right.
So that way, once you're on the page, whatever the mechanism you use, they all have access to it. Do you understand what I mean?
Well, I do have I think so. I have a form, which is just going down the page from top to bottom, and I'd be happy to put this on the screen if that would help.
Sure, you are absolutely welcome.
The first form at the top does create the record, and it's on the form, so it can be seen by the form. But the thing is, when the page loads, the second, third, and fourth form will also be loading at the exact same time.
Right.
And I have to be sure that those forms all pick up the same ID of the new record.
So that's kind of what I was saying. If whatever comes in front of this page that directs you to this page does the ID creation, then by the time you get to this page, it already exists.
Ah.
And if that's not convenient, I mean, if you have one place that's bringing you into this and it's not a .NET menu, you could put it there. If you have lots of different places that could arrive at this page, it would be very annoying to have your initialization code be in many places. So another possibility would be that you have a start page that has a form that's job is to initialize and then redirect you to what now becomes page 2. So they bounce through page 1 that does all the initialization and takes you to page 2, which has all your things on it and initialized.
Okay, I like that. I like the concept of opening the record first and then passing the ID to the next page. I would prefer to not bump people from page to page if I can do it, which is why I have them all on one page. But I could still, there could be an intermediate page that does the bump. So if they click on a link that takes them to the right page, it actually loads a page, creates a record, and then not immediately forwards them to the page where the rest of the stuff is. It could pass the ID at that time.
Right. So your create new event, the initialization part that has an ID happens first.
It happens first and silently. and they don't see it, and they don't see a redirect.
Right.
I'm liking that idea right now. Can you guys see the screen up now?
We do.
Okay.
It's
So-
that's similar to the way mine works, where we have a select customer page, and when it goes to that second level page that you're talking about, if it doesn't have a value, it redirects people back, pick a customer, and then forwards back to the detail that has all the linked forms on it.
Yeah.
That's the
I
same
see.
mechanism.
So
We
Mark,
test in that detail page, we test to see if we got a valid customer ID. In our case, from the session, but whatever mechanism you want to use to store that value.
I see.
Mark, in your case, are the people going to be users of the system in a .NET Nuke sense, or are they anonymous?
Well, yeah, that ties in with Ben's suggestion that Jim alluded to earlier. The concept is you're going to get to use this system free, no charge, in which case you don't need to have a user account in DNN. However, when they upgrade to a paying level, they would have an account behind the scene, which means they would have a user and a user ID. Behind the scenes, I'm creating a new user every time anyway. See, because I need to know their name so that I can report back to them. You know, if you're going to schedule a meeting, you're going to want to pass the name of the meeting organizer to the people who are being invited to the meeting. You know, hey, Dale invited you to this meeting. Are you going to come?
Right.
So you got to have Dale's name. So since I need to have that information, I'm creating a record anyway as for a new user. And so Ben's idea would actually work for me. There's going to be a new user, and my plan is to clean up users who are on the free level. Everyone after the meeting is over,
Yep.
I think I'm free to clean it all up.
Right.
That is another possibility right there.
So if you know, we started talking about, you know, query string is, no, I'm sorry, I'm moving on to mechanism, right? The query string is very ephemeral, but if you have the link, it's, you know, it's rock solid, but as soon as they navigate away from the page, it's gone. Session is timed. You can set session to last quite a very long time, but that's going to, it really is good for, I mean, the idea of a session, sitting down and working within one set of time period. So you could put your ID into session, like user ID, but it has the possibility that you get disconnected from it. And then in your case, you lose the link to the user altogether. So cookie is a good one, especially, you know, if you're consider that two-step initialization page versus detail page, if you want to call it that. So long as you're using that concept, cookie is pretty good with that, because you can store a value in a cookie and then refer to it on the subsequent pages. I've had some problems on the same page when you're trying to set it and consume it on the same page, that it might not be set yet until you actually browse, until the page refreshes. But in the scenario of going from a main page, an initialization page to a detail page, it will be set if they accept cookies. What I kind of, the suggestion, I think you said it was Ben that suggested putting the data into a table. And I've definitely used that one before. And in my case, what I did was to create two tokens. One that was called set variable, and the other was called get variable. And so, and they accepted, the tokens accepted parameters. So you could say set variable ID equals
Whatever.
whatever, and value equals whatever. So you'd pass it two variables, the ID of what you're saving and the variable. And then get variables just had one parameter, which was you pass it the ID and you get the value back. Behind the scenes, set variable is doing a write or overwrite to a simple key value table in SQL, and the get is just doing a read off of that table. And so that is like 100% persistent so long as you know what the key is. So I say all that to say, if you use the cookie to remember your ID, okay, part of the problem with cookies is they're on the user's machine. Users could potentially change the values of a cookie,
yeah,
or manipulate the values of a cookie. So from a security / do you want to worry about that stuff? It's kind of a pain. But if your cookie is just an ID that you use as a key into that persistent data table, you kind of get the best of both worlds. They can't manipulate the values except through your programming. All they can manipulate is the ID, which would only serve to break them from their data.
right. Yeah.
I have a question for this problem, which is, if you're going to have, Dale's going to create a meeting that he wants to invite me to, is your system going to email me or something?
Yeah.
So if you do that, if you're going to put it in email and send it to me because I'm an unregistered user, you're going to, in that email link, you're going to have, I would think, a GUID or something to pull me back to that meeting invite.
That's what it does.
And so that would seem like you're going to end up having that in the URL to start with in your query string to get me to pull it, because you don't have a session or anything at that point to bring it back. You may not be able to get to what you want without a registered user.
Okay. Good point, Jim. This situation that I'm building has maybe a front end and no, put it this way, a step one and a step two. The step one is creating a poll for a meeting time, which is the screen you see, and the only time that they would see an ID is the GUID when they're creating the link that they're going to send out. So I don't know. I think that's that's okay with me for them to see the GUID, because they're not going to guess another GUID of mine.
And
yeah,
from a pollution standpoint, as soon as they land on that page, you've got the GUID, you can store that away in a session or wherever you want to, and then redirect them away to a URL that doesn't have that on it anymore.
Good point. Yeah. So they have it for just a very brief time.
But what if Mark's inviting me to a meeting also, right? And now if you don't have that link when I come back to that page with that GUID, how will you know which one which meeting I'm trying to go back and figure out time?
Yeah, it will have the GUID in the link.
Okay.
In the email. Yeah, the GUID will be there.
Okay.
It would have to be there.
Yep.
Well, Dale, the reason I brought this question up is for advice like you just shared about, you could use a cookie. However, I've noticed that, it's not 100% reliable if you haven't changed pages or other conditions exist. That's the kind of advice I was looking for, because I haven't used cookies for this purpose yet. And I hate to spend hours engineering it that way just to find out that, oh, this breaks it.
And I think most people are, so cookies is still browser dependent. I have no idea what I think most people allow cookies, and it isn't a big deal. But the fact that browsers can turn it off, it's a possibility that somebody would not be able to create a meeting. And perhaps this is something that you just say, you have to accept cookies in order to be able to use the system. If it were real important, we've covered device fingerprint. That was listed in the, I think it's mentioned in answers to your question as well. So you could kind of fall back if you wanted to. You try using cookie and then use device fingerprint, but it just starts to get annoying to try and, how do you?
Yeah, that's a good description. I would think that that's going to get annoying. I do,
How over engineered do you need to be?
right. Reza did several presentations on the Remember Me, and I think that is very powerful and fun for the user who's trying to log in, and it all just works. It took him 3 hours to show us all that. I can't imagine how long it's going to take me to set all that up. And I kind of think it's overkill for what I'm doing. Maybe for something else, it's great.
Yep. Yeah. If you decide, for example, to use cookies, one thing that you could easily do would be to, if your initialization page, okay, we talked about having an init page and a detail page. If your initialization page sets a cookie and then you get to your detail page and you have no cookie, you have no value in the cookie, that's the indication that it's not working, that cookies are disabled by the browser. Right. So at that point, you could send them, you probably send them back to, you don't want to just send them back to your initialization page because it might put them into an endless loop. But you could send them to a page that says, this relies on cookies, you've got to have them turned on or you can't play.
Right. So the important part is I'm testing for that situation and handling it.
Yeah. But other than that, once it's turned on, once you've tested that, they have that the cookie value got set, now you don't have to worry about it anymore. It has.
So, okay. So what about the idea of my tokens constant? It would seem if I can set that value when they arrive, that might suit my purpose. But the question, several questions, and you probably already know the answer is, is that per session or is that like a global thing that the next person is going to see the value I set on the first person? Tell me about a constant my token.
So a constant my token is the value is going to be the same. Unless you use a construct like what I was talking about, where you're passing it an ID so that you can have a different token per user, you can't really set a token to a value. Right? As an administrator, you can, but not in a programmatic sense.
Yeah, I looked for that. I didn't find it. Now I know.
Well, and that's what session and cookie are all about. Temporary storage just for this kind of purpose, to be able to set things by name, set a name to a value. That session, either those three mechanisms, off the query string, off the session, or off the cookie. But if you want that third one, or that last one that I was talking about, building a table and setting values that end up in SQL, you have to do that yourself, but that would be persistent, and you could cache them, and it would be individual for the user.
That wouldn't work because it needs to be different for each person that shows up and creates an event. Okay, what about putting the GUID on the page in some capacity, like in a div or on one of these forms and using JavaScript to find it on the page and use it when necessary across different forms. So now this is a
No.
JavaScript.
Okay, I think you're misunderstanding me. This is, I think the scenario that I described would solve your needs if you assuming you're okay with cookies, your users are okay with cookies. If you put the ID into a cookie and then any data that you want saved uses the cookie value to save and retrieve it, it's all accessible by tokens at that point.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were still talking about I couldn't set a constant token.
Not using the built-in ones, but you could build one quite easily. Would you like me to see if I can find one and show you?
Well, essentially, I'm probably not, because I think you're talking about just using a token to get a cookie, right? Set and get a cookie.
Nope. My suggestion was that yes, you would use a token to set your ID. Let's say you have a cookie called user GUID.
Yeah.
So you would when the user shows up, you would query to see if they have a user GUID yet, and then if they don't, you would assign them one. So at that point, from that point forward, that browser is identifiable to you. And better yet, if they have a user ID, you would even override that with their actual user ID. But now you have a cookie that is user GUID.
Right.
And then the my tokens that I was talking about that allows you to set values in that you're using my tokens as a mechanism to get the SQL to set values in a table. You would be able to say, go look up my user GUID and get back the meeting date or the meeting ID.
Right. Okay.
Mark, was your concern being able to get the data from a reference to some data in your top form to be used in the other forms?
Yes, that is exactly what needs to be solved.
Because like I have forms that have a top form, and then I use the linked forms references on different submit buttons to get values from the other forms. Okay, I think I have one submit button at the bottom. I have to go look at that page.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think link forms means when you hit a submit button on one, it submits the others at the same time.
It probably does. That's what I'm thinking as I say that. If you don't know if we could reference that in an initialization or something.
But I do think you have values accessible to all of to whichever form has a submit button to that link. I think you have access to all the fields at that point.
You have access to all the fields. Well, that does solve the problem. Except, okay. If I link it in that way, do they have to be submitted at the same time, or can they still be submitted independently?
I think they would have to be submitted all at the same time.
Well, it's just the way I did it, and maybe it doesn't need to be this way, but I like it this way, where a person works their way down this page, and when they type in their new event, from your example, Dale, it's going to detect when they've stopped typing, and when they do, it's just going to go ahead and update the name of their event and their title and description.
Mm-hmm.
So that happens right then and there. I kind of want to grab the information as it's being put in so that even if they walk away, I've got something. Yes, so each one of these is being submitted when needed or as it occurs. And by the way, this is in a Tabs Pro module. So these are all separate forms and they're collapsible because of Tabs Pro. Now, if they were all on the same form, then the problem would be solved because, one field would be referred to wherever I needed it on the same form. So a suggestion that came to mind just last night was, wonder if I could put all of these together into one form and then use the manual layout mode and just create my accordion in there to put my fields where I want them to be in there.
Mhm.
I haven't had too much success with the manual mode. Maybe I haven't put enough effort into it, but I don't know. That was another thought.
Yep, and you hate to have to over-engineer, make it harder on yourself in order to accomplish your goal.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to share my screen back and show
Okay.
this to you if you don't mind. Because I think it might be one of those pictures worth 1,000 words. So this is a token that says my application is Whosin. I'm setting a variable named user5 and the name is Warner. And so I do that. It returns nothing, but it's behind the scenes. This has set a value in a temporary table so that I can come in and the reverse function, say for Whosin user5, what do I get? Right, it returns the value. So the definition of these SetValue and GetValue, behind the scenes, they're doing SQL to store the data away. Does that illustrate what I was trying to talk about earlier?
Yeah, that illustrates it well.
So
Yeah, ultimately, I think I'm going to be doing something like that because, like I said, I do have recent revelation. I do have users, whether they know it or not. So I can tie it. When I set this value, I can tie it together with the user, and
Yep.
and they will be logged in. So it's a pretty foolproof way. I think pretty rock solid. And I would use a token just like you've got there. That's a very efficient way to do it.
So when I post this, I'll put these tokens. I mean, I've got it's really 3 tokens because I've got one here that sets up the table. It's out of the way. Just creates the behind the scenes table. You could adapt it for your names, obviously, instead of my old company MBI, but at least it would show a way of setting up that persistent kind of table. And then it's nice to just be able to, wherever you are, if you have something you want to remember, as long as you have a value, in my case, I have an app name and a variable name, and it just will remember that thing. Definitely.
That's pretty useful. Thank you, Dale.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, I don't want to use up all the time today. I appreciate the discussion very much.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know that we, you also asked the question about timing, and I think that whole master form, subform kind of thing, if you just think in terms of putting something in front to create the record, that kind of deals with that.
Right.
And for me, I don't know that it's bad. You asked a question about bad practice. I don't think it's bad practice, but for me, I like using the core features of the product so that it's just bulletproof from version to version. So,
Right.
so those were the ones that were identified in advance, and so we can solve the world's problems. If anybody else has one in the next 5 minutes, we have 5 minutes to solve anything you want. Put David on the spot. You've been awfully quiet today. Yeah,
Sorry, I had my mute button on. I'm multitasking and trying to absorb stuff via osmosis.
Chad, I can call you out because, well, you're on the team. Just anything else anybody wants to finish it out with? We don't have to use all the time.
Actually, Dale, can you touch on setting up the sessions, how you do that in the core tokens? You know, in regard to like a form, if you, instead of using it, putting it in a URL, you know, how you normally would see it in a URL query string?
Sure. So I think we're just saying a little bit of interactive. See if I can find. So just interactively, you can use session. So there's the main one is the set session variable. So if you were to use something like this, that's going to there'll now be a token called the username that you can, a session variable called the username that you can call. It lives in the session however long the session exists. So let's go ahead and try and run this thing. So I think I can illustrate it. When you set session, it returns blank. If we change this into just session and remove the initialization from it, it gives us back the value that we've set. So set session and session are two sides of the same coin. To create and consume the username. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's exactly, yeah. And how is the get or session? How is that?
Right.
I read it, but it doesn't really give a good example.
So this is a cool one because if somebody, and I can't demonstrate it here really quickly, but it goes I might be able to. So I might be able to say, if somebody has a URL that says the username equals Chad, that this is now on the URL, so that if we were to, where's our test tokens? If we were to say, if we would say session the username, we're going to get Dale. But if we say get or session, we're going to get, well, I would have hoped we would have gotten Chad. The idea, and it's a little goofy on the interactive page, right? Versus if you code this into your application. But the idea is that get or session says, well, I'm going to look on the query string to see if the username is there. And if it is, well, I'm going to get my value there. If it's not here, then I'm going to look in session. And either way, I'm going to store it in session. So the idea is somebody can arrive at your website with a variable in the query string, and because you've asked for it via get or session, you get it off the query string, but then it's in session, so it will continue to exist as you navigate from place to place. Let's see if that's so there. That's the thing. If it exists on the query string, it binds it into session, and then it'll still be in the session. So it's doing two things at once. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. Okay, that makes sense.
And so you'll see the same construct in cookies. So you can use get or cookie. So in the example that Mark was talking about, if he's relying on cookie from the it might come from the URL, it might come from the browser previously. You could say get or cookie, so that if it's in the string, then it keeps it uses it from there. If it's already in the browser, it uses it from there. Otherwise, you're going to get blank if the key doesn't exist in either of those places. So.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you were trying to keep that session variable alive longer, could you continue to set it with each interaction you have, each button click?
I believe so. I think a session. There's a couple. The first thing I would look at is, and it's an IIS setting that says how long session lives. This is a normal ASP.NET web construct. So you could look and change the setting and extend it out well past the normal 15 kind of minutes that, or whatever. The default is pretty short, but you could extend it for weeks. But I think you can keep it alive as well.
I thought it refreshed every time you did a submit.
A session?
Yeah.
No, session exists not a submit. No, it's like when you close your browser and come back, or if it times out, that'll be a different session.
Yeah, but I thought if you like just did something, it doesn't push it back out there to the server as you go from page to page.
No, page to page, it should survive. It absolutely should survive. As long as you're on the same website, different page on the same website, it should still be there.
Well, if we can make it last for a couple weeks, then that would solve my issue, my question.
Yep, and so long as you have access to IIS for your website, you can adjust that parameter.
But then there would be a remaining issue of how much space that's taking up on the server, I suppose. How many of those you've got open?
Yep. Yes.
That's a global change too, so you might affect other things inadvertently.
Oh, shoot, yeah. Good point. I do have multiple websites on my server.
Yep. That is true. And yeah, I'm trying to remember about cookies. Yeah, see with cookies, there is a form. Since cookies exist on the browser, you can request them how long you want it to continue to exist on the browser. So if you don't say anything, it'll last for whatever the default time is. But if you add an expires key and put it 10 years out, or whatever the browser allows. I don't know if there's, I mean, it's all dependent on the browser. You're asking the browser to hang on to this for a year, or if you specify a year out. So in theory, it will last a year, but a user can delete them at any time. So it's asking, not enforceable.
And so if you want to basically delete a cookie, do you just set it to equal to nothing? And that's the way to delete it?
I think so. Yep. I think you have to set it to blank.
Okay.
I thought there was a my token that deletes the cookie. I thought there was.
Cookie, set cookie.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't see it either, but I do know you can do that with JavaScript. You do a quick search for a JavaScript to delete a cookie, and it's there.
Yep. Cool. Okay. I'm gonna.
Yeah, thanks, Dale.
Sure. If anybody else, again, as always, if you have a topic that you want to cover, I'd love to be able to do a little bit of research instead of coming into it cold. But I appreciate you guys showing up for this. And we'll
Sure.
see.
I want to thank everybody too. Thanks for the discussion. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. See you next week.